give an overview of their project, and then we'll do that intermission, and then the last half hour of the presentations will be Q&A from everyone here. So are there any questions before we begin? All right, well, we are missing a gin and tonic for me, and I don't know where it went, so if you see it, let me know, please. There you go, Brett.
Hi. Brett Solscheider with the Southwood County YMCA. However, I think we probably should be like this, seeing this is a joint collaborative project that our two organizations are working on. But first of all, thank you for inviting us to be part of this panel and to share more about our project. And obviously, we're interested to hear what questions you have for us. Not to talk all about the project, I want to make sure Ken has some stuff. We're excited about the project. It's a $27.5 million project for, converting over the Rapids Mall. It's a combination of renovation and new spaces. That'll be roughly about 93,000 square feet to really create a state-of-the-art Boys and Girls Club and a new YMCA to kind of help consolidate, but also to reposition our services and what we believe the heart of the community. So we're really excited by that endeavor, and I'll let Kent say a little bit more about our project. So.
Sure. Thanks. Kent Anderson, the Executive Director of the Boys and Girls Club. Thanks for having us tonight. Just really want to touch on the impact that we really believe that we can have with this project. The ability to serve infants all the way up to seniors in one facility, and the collaborations that we are looking at with the VA, the Community Theater, Centralia, and then of course our two organizations is something that we really feel will have real positive impact in our community, and hopefully be a catalyst for other projects at the table tonight to get done and really revitalize that downtown area. So I think that's about all.
Hi, everybody. Madeline Petz. I'm with the City of Wisconsin Rapids in the Community Development Department. I guess using the word heart, which I really liked, I think what I'm going to focus on related to the city projects tonight is kind of what's happening in the heart, central core of both Wisconsin Rapids and then surrounding area. So just a couple of fun updates with the Riverbank project. Just heard today that the construction's starting on Monday, which is pretty exciting. And that'll happen kind of the underbridge by the expressway and then work its way from Demetz Park north. With like Riverwalk, recreation trail, kayak launch and a fishing pier, shade structure at Demetz. So some really neat stuff coming in there. And then phases 2 and 3 subsequent years. I think focus a little bit on the triangle as well. Timeline and the site design are kind of contingent on site acquisition in that neighborhood. But we could still see groundbreaking this year with 18 months for construction after that. And I think especially related to downtown, I'm seeing the city's role as being kind of removing barriers to getting things ready to attract development for the market to take over eventually. So I feel like our role is kind of helping to catalyze a lot of that. Yeah, I guess more to come.
I'm Todd Birch. I'm the CEO of Aspires for Review Hospital. Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate that you still think of me as somewhat young. Let an old fat guy come in. Although I heard Ryan Seacrest on the radio the other day talking about he was a cusp millennial, and he's 3 years older than I am, so I guess I'm fully a millennial if he's a cusp millennial. So I'm in the right room. So Aspirus in the last 3 years has committed to investing $27 million in the future of central Wisconsin here in the greater Wisconsin Rapids area. I was quickly doing math because our project is roughly the same dollar amount as the Y and the Boys and Girls Clubs, but we're only getting about half the square foot that they are, so those guys must be better negotiators than we are at the hospital. Or maybe it just costs a heck of a lot more to build a hospital. So we are investing not only in a new emergency department to meet the growing needs of the population that are just exploding into the emergency department over the last several years. We're also building a new family birth center, which will hopefully change the way that birthing experience happens not only here in central Wisconsin, but across the country. We're doing something different than what most other birthing centers have. We have a very, very large room. It's a little over 500 square foot that we're building as an LDRP. That's labor, delivery, recovery, and postpartum, kind of all in one for those of you that don't have kids yet. And so really the impetus behind that was wanting to pull more of the young professionals such as yourselves into Wisconsin Rapids, because wherever people have their baby, they tend to doctor at and they tend to stick with long term. And the customer's lifetime value in healthcare is about $750,000. So capturing them from the beginning is really important. And so the impetus that, or the edict that I gave whenever we started this was, I want them to feel like they've been at the Ritz-Carlton. I want them to go home and have sex. They have a reason to come back in 9 months. So I was talking to.
And have a beer then.
A beer might be involved in making that happen. I was talking to Derek just earlier before this, and he's got a couple of kids and looking for half a dozen more or so. So I told him he needed to wait about 30 days so he could experience the new birthing center and not the old birthing center. So it's really going to be quite a new experience for everybody for the next 15 or 20 years to be able to have something that is really cutting edge and state of the art. We're also investing in behavioral health. As you may know, that is a significant need in our community, and we're sorely under-resourced at the moment. So we're investing quite significantly, not only in the real estate, but also to develop that program. And that's one of those things that we're doing not because we're going to make money on it. We're actually signing up to lose about $500,000 per year going forward. But it's just one of those things that is the right thing to do, because it ties up so many resources across the entire community when people don't have access to appropriate behavioral health care. We have our primary care providers trying to fill that need right now, and it's just not in their wheelhouse. It's not where they're wired to, what they're wired to do. So hopefully having that will help ease some of the burden on some of the other organizations across the city and across the region. And then we're also expanding. So we're going to be putting a new clinic down in Adams Friendship. We're going to be breaking ground on that here in about 3 weeks. And we already have a substantial population that comes to Rapids to see physicians and use the hospital here in Wisconsin Rapids. We're already the #1 provider of outpatient services in Adams County, and we're the #2 provider of inpatient services in Adams County. And we flip-flop that with UW. So the hospital that's there, Mountain View, is not even the #1 or 2 provider in their own community. I think they're 4 or 5. So we have a substantial population down there, and we're going to do something different than what we've done previously with our outlying clinics in Lakes and Nakusa. We're going to take specialists to them, and we will have specialty services available in Adams County, and then the higher end surgical work will come back to Rapids. So I don't know if you know this or not, but for every dollar spent on healthcare in a rural community, it circulates in the economy 7 times. So the hospital this year will generate about $135 million in net revenue. So if you take that and you multiply it out, because I'm not very good at math, I think it comes to about $950 million that circulates in the local economy. The people are buying gas, they're buying groceries, and a good portion of that we spend to run the hospital, which takes about $120 million to run the hospital on an annual basis. About half of that, about $60 million, is salaries, wages, benefits. So it is directly going into people's pockets who are spending money here. They're going to the grocery store, they're going to the movie theater. And we certainly believe in the future of the greater Wisconsin Rapids area. We're investing heavily in it, and we'll continue to do so. We have recently been recognized as one of the top 100 rural and community hospitals in the country for the 3rd year in a row. And yesterday, Aspirus was named one of the top 15 health systems in the country. So there was no other health systems in Wisconsin that were named to that list. That's a pretty exclusive list, and it says that if you come to us, you're going to get better outcomes, you're going to pay less, your overall quality is going to be much higher than going elsewhere. Just for example of other people that are on there, the only other one that is close to us in proximity is Mayo Clinic. So everybody else is a distant second. So you really have access to world-class healthcare right here through Aspirus in central Wisconsin.
Good news. Well, I would say if Todd thinks that he's old on this panel, then I'm kind of a dinosaur, if you will. Because when I thought about the panel and the subject matter, I came to this community in 1991, and my first professional position here was store manager in the Rapids Mall in what was H.C. Prangy department store. It then became Yonkers, right? And in '97, I became the first full-time employee at what was called the Southwood County Community Foundation, is now Encourage. So 21 years I've been at the helm of Encourage. In that time, we've invested about $75 million in the community, and we've been involved in just about every effort or initiative that there has been in downtown. We've been involved in a number of community development projects that many of you were also involved in or would recognize, or maybe were in kindergarten when they happened. But, you know, I think a few, like the Performing Arts Center at Lincoln High School, the Nakusa Community Center, the Centralia Center, which used to be a blighted, vacant Walmart building, for those of you that have been here long enough. And I have to say, in my career and in my time here, there truly has not been anything that is more challenging, more exciting, and I think more valuable to the long-term economic transformation of this community than the Tribune Building. And I believe that in my heart and soul, and I believe that those of us that have participated, and all of you, are shaping the kind of community that we want. And that was intentional when Encourage purchased the Tribune Building, which was in 2012. We purchased that building after we had looked at different models in the US of what's called a community enterprise. So of everything that we have up here tonight, and even those projects that I mentioned previously, the Tribune is different. It's not a traditional community development where a developer buys the property, invests in the community, and the profit accrues to the developer. It's not a nonprofit. It's what's called a community enterprise, where the entity itself generates revenue, and we'll talk about what some of those uses are. And that's why I mentioned beer, of course. But the revenue then accrues back to supporting the operating expenses of that building and investing in community development and economic growth. So we came back from a trip to San Diego, which we had done several times, and looked at an example called Market Creek as one of many. Came back and determined, along with some donors that we were working with, that the Tribune Building in the center of downtown was a prime location for preservation of that riverfront access and a community asset that we could turn over to the community itself to determine what they wanted to have happen in that space. So I'd fast forward to today and say over 2,000 people have been involved in that process, many of you perhaps. It took 2 years of community facilitated meetings to have residents identify what was important to them and what they wanted in that space. And then for us to market test those ideas and determine that they would cash flow. And as of today, the projected and uses in that Tribune Building will be, as some of you know, a training microbrewery. And that training microbrewery is being realized in partnership with North Central Wisconsin Workforce Development Board. They are filing and pursuing what will be the first brewing apprenticeship in the state of Wisconsin, here in Wisconsin Rapids, out of that building. It'll be a partnership with the Wisconsin Brewers Guild and with Oso Brewing out of Plover, who's been an advisor on that project since the beginning. There'll be what's a culinary kitchen, but more than a culinary kitchen, it's an instructional kitchen. And it will be in partnership with Mid-State Technical College. So Mid-State recently got a new hospitality curriculum approved, which will be a 2-year degree. It has culinary elements to it. So instead of building their own culinary kitchen, they're partnering with Encourage and the Tribune, and we'll host, that kitchen will be an instructional kitchen where Mid-State will be training students on site in the Tribune Building. There will be community space for not only arts, creativity, but also maker activity. So how are we supporting individuals that have ideas for new businesses, entrepreneurs that want to start up, and existing businesses? There'll be a whole space in that area that's dedicated for training and support services. And then ultimately, there are some other aspects like recreational rentals, local products that will be sold there. But really, at the end of the day, what the Tribune represents is the people from our community engaging in determining what they want in their downtown. I think I'll stop there and ask questions.
We have one microphone, so we're going to have to pass it back. Waiting or relying on your questions, but it'd be nice to keep the discussion dynamic tonight. So I guess just to get ourselves resituated here for the panel, it's really great to hear each of the individual projects and their connection to what we call a central place in the city, right? Very special to all of us and holds kind of a unique role. I think individually a little bit different, and there are probably some common themes across us. But I also want to mention, that that the Central Place really serves a much broader region, right? Wisconsin Rapids just happens to be at the center of that region, and I know personally that I view the city's responsibility in that it serves an entire region, that that it has to be a place for everyone in the greater Wisconsin Rapids area, because these projects individually do not just serve Wisconsin Rapids residents, and many of you just don't live in Wisconsin Rapids, maybe yourselves. So I think it's important for us to remember and reflect on the fact that these projects do service users across the Wisconsin Rapids area and beyond. So tonight's discussion on projects in and near the downtown waterfront district obviously serve our entire community and aim to serve users in different ways and maybe in some ways similarly. And I'm excited that we get to share more about these projects through some of your questions and questions we've prepared. And I think it's also an exciting time for many reasons, not only because of the significant amount of capital that's going to be flowing into these projects, but because many of the economic indicators in our community, whether they're unemployment levels, whether it's private sector investment, real estate values for the real estate folks in the room, many of these things have over the last number of years ticked up. And I won't say in major strides, because change doesn't happen in a long view, it doesn't happen in a very short period of time, but I think it gives us many reasons to be optimistic in not only these projects, but also the many other programming opportunities and aspects in our downtown riverfront district. So enough of me speaking. I'm going to kick off with another question, and we're going to take it in order. We'll go, and then we'll change up the order as we go along. But what does success look like to you, to your members or users, and to the community at large? What does success look like to you, to your members, to your users, or to the community at large? Brett or Ken, you want to start us off with the first project?
Sure. I think more holistically for us, I feel it's about connectedness. It's about a place of belonging. I think about a hub for people to come together, to feel welcome, to be part of something. I feel that signifies success for us. And then access, most importantly. I think one of the things that excites us about this is the outcomes that will be able to derive as a result of this project, and greater access for folks from all backgrounds, all walks of life. So, if you come into our facilities, you see that vibrancy, you see that connectedness, that sense of belonging and community happening within our walls, and then how that helps to undergird a lot of the other projects that are interconnected, not only in the downtown but throughout our region. So,
Ditto. Success for the way I look at it in terms of our youth and our community, success is inclusivity, and like Brett said, access. There are a terrible amount of youth in our community that don't have the opportunities, the experience, the ability to get world-class programs, have a world-class facility, and walls are great, but what happens inside those walls is what's most important. And I think success to me is making sure that every child in our community has the access, has the opportunity to do what they want, and have a level playing field to be successful in life.
So this is going to sound kind of funny, but I think that success for both the Riverbank and the Triangle are kind of the tangible components. Obviously, there's a lot of positive momentum right now in Rapids, and I think seeing the actual building go up at the Triangle is going to be, shows a success. And I think seeing the trails along the riverfront be improved and all the other amenities there, I think that'll show success too. And then just generally more activity downtown and the vibrancy that'll come with that. People being outside, you'll be able to see that activity, literally. Let's see. Measured outcome of more housing downtown. So in the 2010 census, there were 7 residents downtown. Hopefully with the Triangle, that'll jump ahead. A lot higher numbers. I think long-term, especially related to recreation with the Riverbank project, there's going to be some pretty tangible health outcomes that, are great partners at the health department will be able to measure and report for us. And then kind of echoing that same sentiment, there's a placemaking and community identity and belonging feeling that will come out of both of the projects, I think, too. Yeah, I think we'll leave it at that.
So I think what success looks like for us is being sure that we are able to serve patients for the next 100 years. So 100 years ago, a few people set out to bring healthcare to the greater Wisconsin Rapids area. Through the decisions that were made, 100 years later, we still have healthcare. You don't have to look very far around the country to see hospitals and healthcare systems are laying people off right and left. There are closures of hospitals around the country because people didn't make the right decisions throughout time. So when we make significant investments like this, there's certainly risk to it. When you bite off $27 million or more, you have execution risk. You have the risk that if it doesn't work out, you're not going to be here. So what I see success is that the decisions that we make are setting up the people that are going to be 2, 3, 4 generations down the line that are going to be able to have quality health care 100 years from now, so that we are setting them up to be successful and not to have to fight out of a hole that we have dug for them. And I think that thus far we have certainly made good decisions. I think that as odd as it may sound, I think one of the best things that could have happened for the future of healthcare in Wisconsin Rapids is for Riverview to be sold to Aspirus. Because of that, there's now a $150 million foundation that every other community in the country would kill to have. And as Legacy continues to build its nest egg, its corpus, they have to give away roughly $7 million a year right now if they don't grow their investments any. For a community this size to have $7 million that's going to come into it every year into perpetuity really sets us off in a way that we are far ahead of everyone else. You back that up with having the size and strength of a system like Aspirus, and you take a lot of the healthcare expenses, a lot of the risk out of that equation, we're in a much better position than a lot of our neighboring communities are, and far better than most of the rest of the country is today.
I agree. I mean, I think we would not be realizing a $27 million Y and Boys and Girls Club without the proceeds that came from the sale of that hospital, that community-owned hospital. So it really is manifest in this facility we're going to have in downtown. I agree totally with everyone. And Kent pulled at my heartstrings when he said, every child that's born in this community deserves to have equal access and opportunity to live a fulfilling life in an economy that supports and has opportunity for everyone, right? I want to add a couple things, and I think this gets to the sentiment behind the Tribune and Encourage, which is for so long, for 100 years, we were the beneficiaries of a single company in a predominant industry, and did some really, really good things for this community. But it also created a sense of dependency on that industry and the company. And part of the long-term success, I think, is us as a community moving away from they will do it for us, whoever they is. And I can tell you lots of times over the last many years we've heard that they is the paper company, or they is the elected officials, or they is the Meade family, right? And we talk about moving from they can do it to I can do it, right? They to me, and then moving from me or my self-interest to we, that we can collectively do it together. And that's a cultural norm around community decision-making, around engaging in neighborhoods, in things that are important to you, like your church, et cetera. But that sense of shared responsibility, shared destiny, and shared humanity, because we share the same community. I can add two more. One is, I think, seeing long-term in that downtown paper mill assets thriving and repurposed in an innovative way, and getting ahead of the curve in terms of what's going to happen in the paper industry. I mean, it's doing some things now, right? But there are really innovative communities across the globe that are looking at those assets that they have and thinking about what does 25 years down the road look like. And we've been having conversations with the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities, and there are opportunities for us to be far more innovative and thinking about assets, those long-term assets that we have. And last, I feel this personally, is success looks like people like me, and I say the dinosaur, right? People like me, and maybe some of you in this room, I see myself as part of a bridge generation. There was a generation in this community that really stewarded the paper industry. They grew a large corporation, and that was a predominant way of doing business. And then that company sold in 2000. And now we've had 17 years of what is really generational transition. And I view myself in my age era as someone who is a bridge, right? A bridge between what was and what will be or is. And I see green shoots across the community of what is this economic transition. These are green shoots right here. All of you are green shoots, right? Young leaders, and it's the responsibility of me and everyone else in positions of power and authority to think about how do we effectively transition leadership to young adults who have a vested interest in the future of this place. And I think that's doing that well is one of the most important things that success looks like.
Thank you. Thank you for, okay, he's telling me I do. Okay, thank you for the thoughtful responses to that question. Again, commercial, I'm looking for your questions, so we get your questions. Here, this is a hardball question, I think, for me to answer, but it may be a softball for you guys. Why a 6-lane pool versus an 8-lane pool in the proposed YMCA Boys and Girls Club project? This is from the audience.
Large in part is just demand. You know, our competitive pool, there's a significant investment going on at Lincoln High School with their competitive aquatics. The YMCA has a swim team. We have a very we're very proud of our swim team, but we serve more demographics than just competitive swim, and so making sure that our pools and the bodies of water can serve a wide demographic of users throughout the entire day. So that was part of our decision pieces as we look at 6 versus 8 lane type of components. So.
I think that answers. If you've got $1, how are you going to spend that dollar, right? You want to spend it to service the most benefit of all your members. Very good. All right. Question that was just touched on, and I think Todd brought it up, and I appreciate the mention, and Kelly kind of answered it too, but this goes to a little bit different take on the whole capital development, right? All of these projects are done by a variety of organizations who are very different, and how they make their money, so to speak, how they pay for their facilities is also different. And so I wanted to maybe touch on the question on fundraising a little bit. Your observations on different approaches in fundraising and why. Todd had talked about the development of the Legacy Foundation and how that's very different than other philanthropic entities that operate in our community. And I'm just curious to maybe you're in your fundraising modes. This is a great opportunity for commercial to talk about your project, but also you can maybe speak to your perspective on fundraising and successful fundraising in your projects.
We use quite a bit of traditional capital fundraising that you would normally see with Ys and Boys and Girls Clubs in other communities. However, we've also been very fortunate to be part of some capacity building training called Blueprints that was really written by Encourage, and that exposed us to alternative capitals, one of which that we are looking to realize as a key component of our project called New Market Tax Credits. So we would have never known that unless we would have been, part of that training and capacity building work as a partner with Encourage and the others that were part of that training. So we see that, there are so many worthy causes, there are so many worthy projects out there. We do have to think differently about capital development, and capital is just more than dollars. It's more than just bricks and mortar. So there's other investments when we think about capital. So, it's helped shape us differently in how we work and how we think about capital and investment and building upon that, certainly. And so I probably could go on, and but I'll stop there and let others speak to that.
Just a little bit to touch on, in terms of our organization, our funding model is one that we provide access for any kid that wants to be there. And so it's not, we don't generate a whole lot of revenue from our membership fees. It's really only about 5% of our overall budget that come in from our membership fees. And so we do rely on the community and the support and philanthropy of individuals and corporations and foundations. One of the great parts about this project is building relationships with folks in our community that will continue and hopefully continue to support the project long after it's completed. But one of the aspects are endowments, and we are lucky to have some endowments that are held by the Encourage Community Foundation, but also through this project we've had the opportunity to help folks understand what it takes for us to be sustainable and continue to provide services for kids over the next 25 plus years. And so we've been very fortunate to see some extreme generosity that have been earmarked, or funds that have been earmarked for endowments for us to help underwrite our operating costs each year.
So I think my response will be a little bit boring compared to the others. I guess both the Riverbank project and the Triangle have used kind of traditional municipal models of funding, and the mayor can probably speak more to this than I can because this isn't my area of expertise. But so with the Riverbank, the Wisconsin DNR stewardship money was the first big piece that came into play, and then kind of that boosted up local support from there. And with the Triangle, it's kind of a combination of city, state, and private developer investment. And I'd say that both, like I said in the beginning, are sort of a fresh approach for Rapids. The city taking a little bit more initiative to kickstart some of these projects. And I've been here for a year, so I don't have the historical perspective that some people here might, but I guess that's my understanding of how things have played out.
So we didn't raise any money for the project, but anybody that wants to write a check, see me afterwards. I'll take your money.
We all write checks to you.
Yeah. Nobody's made the ask, so I'll make the ask. Come give me your money. Yeah, you got to make the ask, guys. You're raising money right now. So with the exception of the Cancer Center, I don't know that Aspirus Riverview has really done a good job raising money over the past 20 or so years. I think that was really the only project that the hospital came to the community and said, look, we need some help to get off the ground. And Nan is kind of shaking her head, so I think that is true. So, and that was a decade ago. So we really have not done much in the way of fundraising at the hospital. There are a number of avenues that are available to us. Actually, at much smaller hospitals in my history, we've raised far more in grant dollars and in donations than the hospital here in Rapids has done. So one of the things we're going to attempt to build over the course of the next several years is that grant seeking, that donation generating mentality that we just don't have at this moment in time. Ask me that question again in 3 years. I hope to be able to give you a far different answer, that we're bringing in on an annual basis in excess of 7 figures, that we are funding research, that we are doing creative things at the hospital that we are not doing today. But at this moment in time, we really don't do much in the way of fundraising.
Okay. So I think yes, yes, and yes. We have money at Encourage, right? And one thing that occurred to me when you were all speaking is I have received the question, you know, why is it that you just don't write a check and fund the Tribune yourself? But Encourage is different. So you heard Kent say there's endowments in Encourage that support Boys and Girls Club, right? Our assets are not undesignated and able to be distributed for community benefit, like legacies, as an example. They're designated for the most part. We have designated endowment funds to support the city zoo, designated funds to support the walking trails along the river, designated funds for the Y, the Boys and Girls Club, and just about every nonprofit organization you can imagine in the community. So a number of our funds are designated. We have some that are undesignated, and we too raise money. We raise money from the community, but also regionally and nationally. And we raise money to support our own operating expenses. Another question that I'll get is, why are there so many people at Encourage, right? Because we're different. So we don't just write grant checks as an institution. We do a lot of work in the community. We did workforce development and training for about 10 years, and that work was funded by national foundations from outside the community. For about 10 years, we've done work with an organization called the Knight Foundation. And Knight's money came from newspapers, so Knight Ridder newspapers. And their money has helped us do community organizing, some investment in community survey, which I hope a number of you just recently took. We did the first one in 2012. We did another one in 2017. But we too are a 501c3, so we're not a private foundation, we're a public foundation, so we are dependent on public contributions. Let me shift to the Tribune and talk about fund development in the Tribune. The Tribune is a different animal. As I said, it's a community enterprise, right? There will be for-profit and nonprofit actors inside the Tribune building. And we have a goal, a total all-in budget of the Tribune is a little over 14 million. And I'm very happy that the YM Boys and Girls Club came into downtown at 27 million because it at least puts context around that 14 million, right? And someone said, I don't know this earlier, how expensive it is for healthcare or redundancy. Brewing equipment is expensive, and when you look at the cost of putting a brewery and the types of facilities in that place. But we also looked at the community, and we knew that having been involved in a lot of traditional capital campaigns where old money or philanthropy would put a lot of money in first. More people of means would put resources in, and then you'd come out to the community for the last stage of the campaign, raising funds. We weren't going to be able to do that with the Tribune because it's different, right? It's a different approach. And we set a goal for the community of $1 million. And we felt $1 million capital or goal for the community was reasonable out of that 14. We set that because we looked at what's happened to family income in our community over the last 17 years, and it has decreased by about 30%. We have higher levels of poverty than we ever have had in the community right now, and I'm looking at Kent because he knows it well from the Boys and Girls Club. So what we wanted to do was set a reasonable goal where gifts of all sizes, like $5, and I hope that many of you bought a monarch butterfly for $5, right? That represented more than just that $5. It represented, like, I can't tell you, hundreds of hours on the part of Richard Breen and others to make those chrysalises, to put that monarch piece together, to have hundreds of school children selling these things to help realize that facility. And what's different about that is a grassroots approach to ownership and feeling a sense of local ownership and control and having a say and a stake in that building itself. We've received early in money from Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, from Art Place America, and we have a gap right now. We want to get to $6 million in grant money or contributions of that total 14 million. We could do the whole thing with debt, as I said earlier, but we don't want to do it with debt. We calculated and looked at the business model for the Tribune. We need $6 million in contributions or grant capital, and it will cash flow in 4 years. There's revenue in beer, right? I'm looking at Richard's Liquors. We know there's revenue in beer, and that's why I brought this, right? So I've got 2 beers in front of me for a reason. This is Potosi, right? This is Potosi beer from Potosi, Wisconsin. And when I said there are other community enterprises across the nation and in the state, a group of us a few years back went to Potosi. They had an old brewery that was brewing beer at the turn of the century that was vacant. And the community was dying. It was dying because some of the headquarters of manufacturing and industrial in that area had moved out, and a small group of community leaders decided we're going to save this community by going back to our roots, and we're going to open up this brewery, and we're going to repurpose it. And it was a remarkable story to hear the people there say it took them, first of all, people thought they were crazy, number one. Second, it took them 4 years to assemble the capital to get the Potosi Brewery started up again. And one of the main guys working on it said, you know, we still had people 7 years into it that didn't believe it was going to happen until they saw the brew tanks coming down the middle of the road, right? But now you see Potosi beer across the state of Wisconsin. I was in Milwaukee over the weekend, and it was served there. And they have since built a new fire department. They've purchased new fire trucks, a new community center, scholarship funds for high school kids, all on the Potosi Brewery. And so it's a community-owned enterprise. And when you buy a Potosi beer, it says all profits to charity on the label, right? Tribune is not exactly all profits to charity, it's all profits to community. It'll go back into that building, it'll go back into training entrepreneurs, and there will be loan funds, which we've established already, 4 loan funds to come up against all the entrepreneurs and businesses that are interested in getting training and services from the Tribune. We'll have loan capital available. So, and then I'm gonna say one thing and then I'll wrap it up. We're in the second year of going to the state looking for state resources. So what we need is like a $1 to $3 million first in, and it will help us unlock the rest of this capital. And now, a second year in, we had business leaders down in Madison with us last year, lobbying and advocating for state investment here. And I have to tell you, we deserve state investment here when you look at how we compare to the rest of the state. This year, Krug and Teston both have said, number one legislative item is getting money in here for the Tribune. Just recently, like last month, it was Synergy-sponsored Central Wisconsin Days, which is a lobbying day in Madison for the 4-county area. So we had business leaders from the 4-county area all down in Madison lobbying for $3 million for the Tribune from the state, from legislators. We're hosting an economic summit May 10th here for legislators to come here and see the opportunities for investment in our community. It'll include Tribune. They'll see Sand Valley where they had airport investment from last year, right? So that's one example. Last month, I'm just gonna, and I'll stop soon. Last month, I have to just say, and I don't say this, I say this just as a piece of information. It is apparent to us at Encourage that the Tribune is valued more outside of this community and at a state level and national level as being innovative and an innovation in economic development. Last month, we were at Marquette University with UW-Madison's WARF, which is Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, and highlighted as an exemplar in economic innovation in the state of Wisconsin, right? Wisconsin Public Service next month or the month after is going to highlight the top 3 innovations in economic development in the state. The Tribune will be one of them, right? So there are elements of this kind of community-driven process that are considered to be very innovative in terms of how do you foster economic growth that is sustainable because it's driven by the community itself. So we see the community survey that just came out that I referenced, very heartening to us this year as compared to 5 years ago, is one of the top responses is that all demographics in our community say that being open to new ideas and change is critical for our future. And that wasn't the case 5 years ago. Some said, yes, we need to be open to new ideas and change, but there's a marked increase now 5 years later across the community with 4,000 people responding saying, we have to be open to new ideas and change. And the Tribune represents new ideas and change. So I hope that you all will embrace new ideas and change and believe that the Tribune, long term, is going to be really valuable in the center of downtown.
Yes, I was just going to have a quick comment, and thank you all for giving your take on that question. Things that are unfamiliar oftentimes breed about negativity or lack of confidence, and I think a lot can be said to what Kelly just said, that even in my experience working with the city council, which is not representative of this group in here today, 6 years ago, was when we were pitching different ideas to the city council, things that were unfamiliar just were not celebrated. They were not pursued. And so I think to Kelly's point and to the other points that have been mentioned, we have to continue to do what's necessary in this community to bring about the new ideas that people are looking for, especially those that are so unfamiliar or untested in our own community. So thank you. But yes, Jill, you'd like to ask a question? Do you want to ask a question? Okay. Okay. Great. I'm going to give you the microphone because I need to pick it up.
It's a good tagline off of what Kelly was saying, talking about what's next. So I'd love to hear from each organization what's next, because certainly things are underway and hopefully we're seeing shovels in the ground and things happening. So what's next? I'm sure that each of you are already thinking, and Kelly mentioned some of the plans. What are you going to do in the facility? What are the programs? What are your next big goals?
We'll work in reverse. Kelly, we'll start down here.
I better be quick. I'll be very quick this time. What's next? And I'll be brief. This little card on your table will just tell you a little bit about what's next. What we decided was we're not going to have a shovel in the ground when the Y and the Boys and Girls Club have a shovel in the ground. Optimistically, if the governor will put $3 million in, we told him that we can guarantee we'll have a shovel in the ground before the election in November, and it would be to his credit if he could put $3 million in here. That said, what we wanted to do was to demonstrate to the community what kind of activities and programming will happen in the Tribune building. And so what you see here is a list of dates where there will be programmatic activities that will happen either in the Tribune. It's an unheated building, I will tell you that, so it won't happen in the middle of the winter. But like the home brewers will be there doing Brewing 101. We'll do a partnership with Midstate where there'll be culinary demonstrations of what would happen in the space. And then we've partnered with 4 what are called CDFIs, Community Development Financial Institutions in Wisconsin, where Encourage has invested money in those institutions that are loan funds. They'll come in partnership with Heart of Wisconsin, and they'll be on-site pop-up kind of technical assistance for entrepreneurs and startups looking for funding money. This is the start of pop-up programming to demonstrate to the community and see what appetite is there for what will happen in the Tribune.
So Riverview is still becoming what it's going to be. If you look at our historical trend map over the 2012 to 2015 timeframe, we were just almost dead flat from a growth perspective. We were almost flat at about 88 million, 90 million. It would fluctuate very little in there. As we finish this year, we're going to be close to 135 million. So in 3 years, we're going to have grown almost $45 million. And as we continue to grow over the course of the next few years, we're going to have to make additional investments. We are currently evaluating phase 2 of a building project, which is another roughly $17 million that we are working to figure out what makes the most sense to bring in next as we continue to grow. Long term, this hospital will be 180 to 200 million as its equilibrium. So that means we still have roughly 50 million of growth opportunity in us, maybe a little bit more depending on what services we're able to bring in. So as we continue to grow into that, the population is here. We need to bring services that have not always been here. And as we evaluate those over the next few months and few years, we will make them whenever it is, when it's logical. Don't know we're gonna have a shovel in the ground before the governor, but luckily he doesn't need it. He doesn't need my vote.
Don't put that in the newspaper.
No. Kelly needs that. I don't need that. So we have significant investments that we are considering. You take the 27 million that we put in already, the 17 that we're considering. There's potentially another phase. We could easily be over $50 million over a 5-year period of investments in the Greater Rapids area.
So for the Riverbank project, like I said, phase 1 is starting on Monday, and that construction will go through the summer, and then probably wrap up like late September. And then phase 2 and 3 will include Mead Rapids View Park and Veterans Memorial. I guess related to the triangle, the goals there are 3 stories with underground parking. The 2nd and 3rd floor will be residential, mostly 1 and 2 bedroom apartments with some 3 probably. And then the ground level is kind of mixed use commercial, so office space. I guess there's been an idea floated around that we're kind of interested in, like a public market type concept potentially, something food related maybe. But yeah, I think all of that is pretty exciting. And then I think more broadly, goals would be to continue kind of being involved in investing in downtown. I think that was one of the reasons I was really drawn to this position actually, was the focus on downtown in my department in community development, but then with the city more broadly, so.
Thanks. So I touched on a little bit already, but you know what's next is what happens inside the walls once they're up and once our building's complete. And Brett and I work. They coin us Brent, if you haven't heard that yet, because we see each other every day. Madeline was asking how often we see each other, and it's pretty much daily. But working together to really find the efficiencies and the synergies within those walls that we can piggyback off each other on the different programs. We can share staff and really find ways to serve our populations better. Specifically on the Boys and Girls Club side, I think our programming needs some refreshing and some attention to really look at the needs in our community for our youth and how do we start addressing those each day that kids come to the club. So finding ways to adapt our program to what's going on. So whether that's the drug epidemic that's going on in our community, bullying, self-esteem issues, obesity, those type of things that we can work together and collectively have a greater impact on. That's what I see as next.
Kent says it so well. What I would add to what he says is in short term, we're still raising money. We're very close to reaching our goal, but we still have a little ways to go, and it is our hope that work will begin here by August or September of this year, this fall, with an open date of late fall of 2019 or January of 2020. So that's the immediate piece of this, and then Ken speaks well to the bigger picture that now is where we change the culture within our two organizations. So it's not just about how we work together, but it's a new paradigm of work. So deepening our relationships with our existing partners. I mean, we're partners with Aspirus. We're going to have partners with the VA clinic. How do we strengthen those partnerships and go deeper with them to think about new programs and new innovations? But then think about how we serve the people that come in through our doors each and every day differently. How do we serve the community different? We're going to have such an influx of constituents, and so what does outreach look like? So I think that is part of our big piece is now how does the culture come behind what's going to be a great platform for us to serve more people with greater access to programming than ever before.
Great. We had to get the ask, so thanks for making the ask to the audience. These projects do need support yet, and obviously in support in so many different ways. What other questions do we have from folks that want to ask a question? Yes, Jenna.
I'm happy to take the microphone around anywhere, obviously. It's kind of directed more to Todd, but of course, if anyone can address this as well, feel free. Could you elaborate a little more on the investments in mental health? And like what the investment means, is it more positions for therapists or counselors or what it looks like?
So what we're investing in right now is really outpatient behavioral health. And we had behavioral health previously. You might remember that we had a single psychiatrist, and whenever she left the community, Riverview no longer had behavioral health services. So what we're going to attempt to build over the next 2 to 3 years, and this is one of the things the Legacy helped fund. They gave us some seed money, about $1.2 million, because this is a losing proposition from a financial perspective, in order to incentivize that initial investment, help take some of those first costs off the shelf for us. So we're looking for 2 psychiatrists, 2 psychiatric nurse practitioners, a handful of licensed clinical social workers. Today we began training our ED to recovery coaches that will help intervene with people who are suffering from substance abuse issues when they present to the ED. We will have interventions with them from that moment forward. We have just some ungodly, horrible stories that happen in the ED. I remember it was last summer. There was, at the time, the donut was still open. You could still come in the ambulance garage and pull through. And this car pulled in the ED, honked the horn, and they pushed a young man out the door. And he was overdosing. And as the nursing staff got there into the garage, the car drove away. Great friends, and left him there. What they saw in that back window, though, was what they described as probably a 5 or 6 year old little boy that was sitting next to that guy who had OD'd in the back seat. That kid is going to carry that experience with him forever. You're not going to unsee that. You can't not be a part of that once you're there. And so it's not just the young man that OD'd, who we were thankfully able to save, but that impact throughout the community, it just ripples everywhere. It's one of those things that a single experience can touch so many people and so many lives in so many different ways. So hopefully this outpatient behavioral health is that first step so that we can get back into that service, because it is so desperately needed, not only here but nationwide. And it's one of those, the opioid epidemic that we have right now is really an unintended consequence from what seemed like a good decision a decade ago. So I'm sure nobody here remembers this, but back in 2005, 2006, when they were coming out with HCAP scores, where they kind of grade hospitals for how you do, what's your customer experience like? And one of the questions that they put in there was your pain completely controlled? Well, we don't completely control pain. Up until that point, some pain is okay because it lets you know that you're still alive. It lets you know what hurts. But they began asking patients that. And so that began to incentivize doctors to give more prescription drugs than they needed to give, because the government was now saying, we don't want people to feel pain. Because of that, because of one person's good intention for writing a question thinking that people shouldn't have been in pain, we have lost hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives over the last decade or more because of a single question. So you have to be very careful when you're setting policy at a global level that you don't unintentionally kill 1 million people, because that's exactly what happened with this situation. So hopefully we will start to address that in a small way. I think we have a good lead on a psychiatric nurse practitioner. We're hopeful that we will start that service later this summer, and we have several psychiatrists that are in the queue to interview over the next couple of months. So hopefully we'll be fully staffed in 2 to 3 years.
Long-term work, right? A lot of this is all long-term work. Other questions from the group? Thanks for that question. Other questions from the group? Okay. Well, while you're thinking of a question, the current question from Current was, what is the community ROI and how will it benefit and or impact the community in the short and the long term? And I guess another way to ask the question I think about is thinking about 20 years ahead. The community will be a different community at that point. How will your project or your work or the work of the organization play a role in that community? So either take it in the return on investment, because that's one way to think about it, but also think about how your project will play a role in that future community in which we'll all live in. Anybody want to start with that one?
Just to speak to Todd's point a little bit, thanks for sharing that story. It raises the hair on the back of my neck. It makes me so angry that parents allow their kids to be exposed to things like that. And the big thing that we see now is we have to get upstream of where our kids are at today. We're already paying for the adults that have already positioned themselves with bad behaviors and bad choices throughout their lives. And we're paying millions and millions of dollars to try to combat that now, where we need to get upstream with our kids to help them, teach them good behaviors and help them understand what options they have to get out of some of the cycles that they're in. And I can just speak a little bit about that mental health question. We've recently engage in a partnership with UWSP, and we are going to be a site for interns through their sociology and social work. And this next fall through May, from August through May, we're going to be housing a social work undergrad student through UWSP that will be in our club 2 days a week, working with kids one-on-one, small groups, training some of our staff, and doing some family engagement. So further than that, it goes back to what Brett and I talk about daily. How do we get upstream, and how do we affect those kids, and how do we give them those tools to know how to make those choices as they get older? We talk about shared services, and we talk about shared positions. One of the things that we're looking at is a teen director position that is also a mental health specialist, and those type of things that we can do now that will really affect our kids in the long run. And I think that speaks directly to that ROI in 20 years from now.
So in 20 years from now, somebody else will sit in my seat and they'll ask, why did that idiot build that the way that they built it? Because that's what every hospital CEO does for every building. In 20 years, what we're building today will be obsolete, and we'll be looking at building something new, or we'll be living with space that we don't like, trying to get to the next building project. I think over the course of the next 10 to 20 years, the face of healthcare is going to change drastically, and we're going to not have people come to the hospital. I mean, we're already on that trajectory. We have been for a good 20 years at this point. I think 20 years from now, you will probably not come to the hospital unless you are actively trying to die. We will figure out how to take care of you in your home. We will figure out how to take care of you on your phone, because hospitals are where the sick people are. It's really not a very good place to get well whenever we congregate everybody together. So over the next 20 years, I think we'll figure out how to move a lot of care away from the physical structure, with the exception of the very, very sickest patients. So I think the long-term ROI is not necessarily in the capital. For those of you that have done a lot of capital projects, you know that the upfront numbers are really impressive and they sound really cool and awesome that you're having a multi-million-dollar project, but that's not really the expense. That's not really the return. The community return on investment is the next 20 years worth of wages that we're going to invest into running those operations. Right now, we invest roughly 60 million. 20 years from now, if we get up to the 180, 200 million range, we're going to be investing 90 to 100 million dollars a year in wages. That's really the return on the investment for the community. Those wages that are coming in, the houses that will be built, the young families that have to come in because of it. As you all probably know, we have a critical shortage of housing right now. We're hiring people into the hospital and we can't find a place for them to live. We're losing them over to the Stevens Point area because there's houses available. So I think that's really where our long-term investment is going to be, or the return for the community is really what are we investing in operations that causes us to continue to pay wages into the community, which will feed everyone here from restaurants to the liquor store to the grocery store, and that's how we really have the long-term impact, because the capital project is really small potatoes in the grand scheme of the world.
It is. I agree. The capital part of it is the small potatoes. The long term is, and I think on three levels of return. First is when you think about the collective or connected return between and across even the investments here on this panel, right, is that an investment in economic growth and business development for supporting entrepreneurs, and a connected investment in healthcare and for-profit mental health, a connection or an investment on the younger youth in the community in terms of the life course, and then an investment in overall health in the community. You connect these things together. Each on their own has their own ROI over the long term, but together and with intentional connection. When Brett talked about this program Blueprints that we ran for about a year with projects and institutions, the city, the Y, the county, the housing authority, the premise was we can do so much more together than we can alone when we look at projects. Different sources of financing, different sources of mapping strategy long term so we can increase return for everybody. So that's one, I think, is the connected. The other ROI that actually we were in a conversation this morning around community survey results, and it was about business and the composition of business in the community. And if we think about what kinds of businesses we have here, we migrated away from really a strong single company, a corporation that had a supply chain built off of it with related industry that supported the paper industry. Not that the paper industry is gone, it's here still, but it's not one single corporation in the way that it had been in the past. We have a good number of small to mid-sized businesses, which are called Main Street entrepreneurs. Kauffman Foundation would call them this. But I would tell you that we and the Heart of Wisconsin Chamber look at those size businesses and think about how old are the people that own those businesses if they're local? Are there succession plans in place for some of these mid-sized businesses? We're going to have gaps in this community when we look at the kinds of services and businesses that we have, and we have to think about how do we transition business ownership and the kinds of businesses? Are there gaps? Transition them to young people that want to take over businesses. And then on the front end of the business pipeline would be startups, right? You hear a lot of businesses today that we work with say we don't have enough workers. We don't have enough workers to fill positions, right? And that's a pain point across the state. But it will not always be that way. And we need to be thinking about on the front end, how are we fostering startups in the form of entrepreneurs, new ideas and innovation? We could have the next Renaissance learning here, right? Starting with some support and investment in nurturing. And that's the kind of innovation we need to look for. So long-term ROI is really building a healthy, diverse composition of business. And then I have to say something about culture. And long-term ROI is not just the capital investment, the bricks and mortar. It's the kind of behavior change that happens as a result of these investments, right? That we destigmatize mental health, right? That everyone has mental health issues and we make it far more accessible. That we think about working together for a shared goal as a community. You know, that idea of shared sense of responsibility. So ROI is investment in changing behaviors, attitudes, and we talk about changing hearts and minds and our ability to work collectively together as a community.
We're running up against time. Is there a question? I see a hand going up in the. You didn't get a chance?
Can I just add real
Yeah,
quick?
please,
Very well said, and I would echo Todd's comments about all these projects are more than just the building. It's really about the outcomes that we really want to visualize for our community. And to tie on to something that Kelly said is that we each have an individual role to play, but they are very much interconnected and to help support a bigger vision for our community. I think that for me, I hear the latest community results, and I hear what folks across the life spectrum are looking for and what their hopes and dreams are. And so each of these projects helps to support that in their own specific way. At the individual level, for us, it is truly about how do we make this the healthiest community to be in. And health is just a broad topic, right? I mean, so spirit, mind, and body. How do we make this the healthiest place to live, and health in all areas of that piece? And I do think that the ROI is that you're starting to see and have been seeing more and more organizations working together. You know, it's uncommon for our two organizations to do partnership like this stuff, but we've been working at it quite well for the last 2 to 3 years. More and more programs that we do jointly together. So, you know, it's just we hope that it can be a model for others to say, okay, how do we stop trying to hold on and protect what we have and realize that there's a greater gain to be had as a result of working together. So, thanks.
Thank you for that. Was there a last word, Kelly, you had? Yeah, I was going to, because I think I'm gonna look to Jenna here just to make sure we're okay. She's the timekeeper. So, yeah, if you want to, is there a wrap-up question you'd like me to jump to, or you want to give these guys the opportunity to say a last word? Okay. Yes, your question. I'll repeat it for you if you could. Maybe you could address that in your wrap-up. The question was related to attraction and retention of talented professionals, physicians, nurse practitioners down the line. It's a great question. Great question. So I'm going to pass it down to Todd. Do you want to start up with a wrap-up and address the question on the?
So a couple things that we're doing to address that issue is we have started a medical school at Wausau, and that started a year and a half ago, I believe it was. We have our second class in now, and next year we will have our third class, and that's kind of the rotation. It's a 3-year rotation through, so once we get through the next, whatever it is, 16 months or so, we will then have a full slate of 25 students going through med school. The problem isn't necessarily med school. The problem is residency slots. And we don't have enough residency slots across the country to fill the need that we have for physicians. This moment in history is kind of that perfect storm that we've all talked about for 20 years, that there's this perfect congruence of people aging into Medicare at a rate of 10,000 people per day are turning 65. At the same time, a lot of our doctors are over 65 and are retiring out. Our average age of our physician is in the mid-50s. Unfortunately, one of our closest competitors, their average age is 60 plus. So we will have significant shortages beyond what we're experiencing today in the very near future. Now, one of the other things that we are benefiting from is the Legacy Foundation put in funds into a scholarship program, which is helping to provide scholarships to, I get this wrong, I think it is up to it's up to 6 physicians, 2 each year, a first year, second year, third year, if they will commit to coming back and practicing within the Aspira system. So it's a very healthy scholarship that we're awarding. It's $150,000 per person because med school is ungodly expensive to go through. So that will help. The problem is it's not going to help us for another 4.5 years till that first student that came through, that started in med school, finishes med school, goes off to residency, then comes back. We are focusing those scholarship dollars on family practice and psychiatry primarily. So it will long-term start to pay dividends. We will start to have a supply of physicians that are coming out. It's just a very, very long-term investment that we're making. Right now, we are all competing for the same very, very few physicians across the country. And I think we're seeing that transition from physician to nurse practitioner and PA, which everyone is experiencing. I think we've maybe been a little bit behind the 8 ball with making that transition, but our mix, even at Doctor's Clinic, which is the largest clinic in the Aspira system, up until this past year was still weighted more heavily towards physicians than it was nurse practitioners and PAs. We're just making that transition over, whereas in most of the country, they're already at 1 physician to 1 nurse or 2 nurse practitioners and PAs, and we're just barely at a 1-to-1 ratio right now. So that will help us as we continue to make that transition. But long term, there really aren't great solutions for that because we need more residency slots. Now, we are going to be looking at starting a rural residency track up in Anago at Aspira's Langlade Hospital. And long term, we're still evaluating whether we would start a residency program here in the greater Wisconsin Rapids community. That is not anywhere near even being on the drawing board. It is strictly an idea at this moment in time. Once it gets on the drawing board, till you get approval, it's like a mere 4 or 5 years until you actually have your first resident. So that is a very long-term proposition that will probably play out, but it's not going to be anytime soon. Does that answer your question? Okay. And in closing, I'd just like to say thank you for allowing this cuss millennial to show up and participate. Thank you for being involved in the community. Thank you for all that you have done in the work. And thank you for coming back to Central Wisconsin and investing your time, energy, and talents here.
Ditto. And I'm not a cuss millennial, I'm a last year baby boomer. But I want to answer that question about residency because it's about more than just that specific effort. It's about a holistic approach here, right? And when we think about other assets in the community like Mid-State Technical College as an example, and how are we thinking about young people and encouraging them then to go into the kind of occupations that we need longer term, whether it's healthcare, manufacturing, what do we see on the horizon, and how do the kids know what occupations are on the horizon, right? The Heart of Wisconsin does things like a heavy metal bus tour to expose young people at a younger age. So really that idea of attracting and retaining and building a pipeline starts very young, and it starts with all of us. I mean, really, years ago we had manufacturers that did a poll of employees, and 94% of their employees were telling their children, don't come back to the community and don't pursue a career in manufacturing or paper, right? So there is this narrative that if they've experienced job loss themselves, it's up to us to change that narrative for our kids in terms of seeing opportunity here. But I do want to say, I want to mention in closing the picnic, the community picnic, when you said what's next. I hope, and I know half of you have been there or worked many, many hours, right, Jenna? And that is an opportunity to celebrate local food, this community, and meet people that we don't know, because meeting each other is part of celebrating downtown. It'll be the first Wednesday in August. And then the last thing that I should say is we have a number of people this evening asked me about the Tribune buttons, and every single one of them would be happy to talk to you about how you can make a contribution to support the Tribune.
So I guess echoing what everyone's saying, but speaking to attracting and retaining young talent, I think, and this is me personally as well as professionally, it's like people aren't going to move here because of one of these projects. They're going to move here because of all of them together, what they all bring to the table, and that whole pie, so to speak. So, I think it is key, and it's happening for all the leaders in the community to work together to make the place with everybody here, and with the community. You form it together, you create it together, you make the place together. And, there are different components there. It's the culture of health, it's housing, it's a thriving downtown riverfront district, which we're working on. It's all of that together. So, yeah, I guess that's closing, and that's kind of answering the question here too. But.
First of all, thank you for having us tonight. It is exciting to talk about our projects and share all the information with you. But what I want to finish with is I'm pretty sure I'm the only one on the panel that was born and raised in Wisconsin Rapids. I left when I was in high school and I said, see ya, never coming back. Things brought me back here, and it didn't take very long to see what this community had that was different than 20 years ago. And I think we are on somewhat of a tipping point in our community that we are ready for change, and we're ready to create that narrative that we talk about and do that for the betterment of our community. And all of these projects are just a small piece of what that is, but it takes everyone in our community, and I know there are others in the room that have been born and raised in Rapids and seen the transformation over the last few years. And I think what better time than right now to make those changes and be ready to put our community on the map and really celebrate the things that we have to offer, because we have so much more to offer than what meets the eye of those kids that say that I'm leaving and I'm never coming back, or those parents that say, don't come back, you don't have any jobs here, there's nothing to do. It boils my blood to think about, and I'll be the first to admit, I said that when I left, and coming back here, it takes you coming back here to see all the good that's going on in our community, and all of you in the room are doing what it takes to make us a healthier and better place to live. So thank you, and thanks for having us.
Just to touch upon healthcare, for us in our world, we believe it's beyond just treatment of disease. It's actually prevention. And so as much as we think about, job creation from that perspective, I foresee that there's going to be great opportunity as a result of our collective project and new positions that we haven't even thought of. We have great partnerships with Midstate, in terms of health promotion and wellness, let alone early childhood and other areas. But when we talk about individual health, you got to meet them at everyone's at different stages with that, and what does that mean to them? And that's going to take new skill sets. And, working with partners like Midstate or UW-Stevens Point, we see a greater opportunity to really impact individuals, not only upstream with youth and that whole life spectrum, but adults and families and our older population. So we get excited by that. And then when you have the trifecta, when you have education and you have community-based wellness like us, as well as a world-class healthcare provider like Aspirus, boy, when we think about health outcomes, boy, I get excited by that piece. And from our world, 7 out of 10 deaths are preventable. They're chronic disease related. So getting people up and getting them active, is all part of that prevention. As Kent and everybody else said, thank you for having us. I felt this is very much an honor and privilege to be here with you. And hopefully, as you hear all these projects and hear the excitement of it, this is exciting times for our community. And hopefully, you see yourself in all of these projects, because this is our community. These are our projects, and so we have much to celebrate. But we can shape our own future, and so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you all for your attention, and obviously it's YP Week, so it bears mentioning that that this shared space, this community that we share across ourselves, and each of the projects that were talked about tonight really brings value, not only to the people that live here, but also for future residents, for residents that aren't currently here, that haven't been engaged in the work. And I think it just give this panel a round of applause, I think, for their dedication, their leadership to their causes. And I think, as Brett had indicated and others touched on too, it's so much more than just the folks that have the privilege and the honor to speak up here, right? And it gives me a great excitement to hear these folks speak about their projects, because it really takes a whole community of individuals, whether they're donors or whether they're sponsors or whether they're supporters or just basic community members who are advocating for the various projects. So thank them too, and I encourage you to reach out to somebody that may have a question about one of these projects and get them connected with these folks, because they're in the best position to speak about their projects and why these projects really should happen in our community. So thank you all very much for your attention, and we believe that this is a great piece for YP Week. Sorry? All right, here we go. So I wasn't going to close it up, but I'll give the microphone back to Jenna. Thank you all.
I would love another round of applause for these wonderful panelists because I think that was really phenomenal. So, fun fact, every single person on the panel, or at least the organization, has directly engaged with Current. We've had Boys and Girls Club, City of Wisconsin Rapids, and Encourage at Get Currents. Todd was with us at our very first YP week for a wonderful kickoff event. We had a tour of the still gutted third floor, which is now the Family Birthing Center. Yes. So I just really want to thank you all for your continued passion for and investment in our community. And I'm not trying to cut you out here. Mayor Verwink has moderated this panel for the 3rd year in a row. So thank you so much for that. We really value your participation and really appreciate it. So in closing, we do have a few more events for YP Week. You can join us tomorrow bright and early at 7 a.m. at Limitless. We're going to do a yoga session there. And then if you can't make the 7 a.m. or if that's not really your cup of tea, we'll have an actual workout session at 7 p.m. also at Limitless. So we hope you can join us there. And then Thursday, we're having from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. a pop-up happy hour, also featuring Milkweed Market. And that is at 340 West Grand Avenue. It's right between City Hall and the Johnson Hills building. And you can join us there for some drinks and some really cool home decor from Milkweed Market. So we really hope to see you at any of those events. If you have not paid your current membership, they will be $5 each, unless you're a member of Limitless, in which case you will not have to pay that $5. But if you are a member of Current, they will be free. So we hope to see you there, and I've already gotten 2 memberships tonight, so if you want to help me up that, that would be wonderful. So thank you so much for coming tonight. We really appreciate it, and I hope you have a great night.